Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is the Vulgar Marxist. Christmas has once again reduced my schedule to a shit show. And there's really not much I can do about that. I have to blow my nose immediately. I'll be right back. So, tissues now in hand. Christmas has once again reduced my schedule to a shit show. So we are doing a combination video game and politics talk for this month. And hilariously enough, the ascendancy of the Democratic Party into Congress has actually made the left fairly quiescent. There isn't much to complain about right now. People aren't making insane pronouncements about the direction socialism has to move in. So we're going to nitpick something quickly. Yes, I have a head cold. You have my apologies. We are going to nitpick something. And it is something I have been talking about for the last 5-6 years, well before Gamergate, so at least since 2013, around the time that the anarchist subreddit decided to ban all of its primitivists for transphobia. Now, that primitivism would necessarily oppose plastic surgery is kind of an moment. But I will not say they are without a legitimate point. If the current rate of consumption is unsustainable, then we are going to have a very large discussion about what sustainable consumption would look like. Who gets to drive a car? Does a professor who lives 5 blocks from the school get to drive a car? Does a truck driver or a factory worker who may live 50 miles from their place of employment, are they required to move? Will they be assisted in moving? This is something we have not discussed, and it is a discussion we are going to need to have. But that aside, I'm really in no condition to do a video right now. Instead of having a calm and reasoned discussion, the anarchist subreddit decided to arbitrarily ban anyone on one side of this discussion and unilaterally declare anyone attempting to have the discussion to be transphobic. Which brings us to the last week, and a young woman named AngieSpeaks. Now, AngieSpeaks, from what I have seen of her, is quite reasonable. I don't have huge objections to anything she's saying. She's not proposing things like an African-American Wall Street. AngieSpeaks is an African-American female, however, just so you know. However, she recently became the target of feminists. I'm not even certain who at this point. This was such an interesting operation. It is entirely possible this was a camo op, false flag, whatever you call it. It was a group of people. It is entirely possible this was a group of people who are not, in fact, anarchists harassing this woman out of the anarchist community, which is functionally what has happened. I have no reason to think she's coming back at this point. Her Twitter account is still there, her channel is still up, but she's apparently taking an extended hiatus, and I'm not certain she's going to be returning after what she went through. For those unfamiliar, what I can gather, and again, this is second or third hand knowledge on my part, AngieSpeaks invited a gentleman named Peter Coffin, who, again, me working 70 hours a week, I haven't had time to watch his YouTube channel, on to her channel to have a discussion. Mr. Coffin had previously invited someone else, who is apparently transgender and had been accused of sexual assault, on to his channel for a discussion, and a significant number of people within the anarchist community were insisting he needed to be blacklisted for doing so. Now, I have already covered why a speech platform needs to be available to any and all who wish to use it, not merely because it is necessary for the correct direction of a socialist institution to be determined, but also because to declare a speech platform off limits to certain persons is to declare it a form of property. So, attempting to deplatform someone because you don't happen to like someone they've invited on is, one, a declaration of property, and two, a violation of dialectics. That said, what ensued, from what I have seen, can only be described as the systematic harassment of both Peter Coffin and AngieSpeaks for violating the deplatforming of, well, whomever. This is first an interesting escalation. Previously, deplatforming efforts had merely been targeted at a single individual. If another individual chose to give them a platform, that was their decision. You didn't harass people until they did what you wanted. You simply said, hey, this person is deplatformed, and if they chose to go along with it, awesome. If they didn't, awesome. However, we have seen numerous, and I mean numerous, efforts to deplatform people for wrongthink within the anarchist and socialist communities. I think I've now been banned from very nearly every single anarchist Reddit out there, merely for asking the question, okay, can a movement that is concerned with the number of CEOs at Fortune 500 companies be understood as anarchist or communist? Seems a perfectly fair question to me. But other people disagreed, and so I am now no longer allowed on most, if not all, anarchist message boards. What was interesting here is that because AngieSpeaks happened to be an African American female, people who previously would have been entirely fine with deplatforming someone were suddenly horrified and outraged about it. Now again, this is no reflection on AngieSpeaks. Her views, as best I can find them, correlate closely with my own, and I would be very happy to sit down and have an extended conversation with her. Entirely civilly and completely polite, no traps, no bait, no nothing. Hey, what do you think of this? But because she happened to be African American, and possibly because she was one level removed, Everyone was quite horrified, and these were people who had previously very loudly advocated deplatforming. Christiosity, Kevin Logan, absolutely horrified that this had happened to her. And the question I have for Christiosity and Kevin Logan, if this had been limited only to Peter Coffin, if the exact same series of circumstances had occurred and it was Peter Coffin, and Peter Coffin alone who was having to deal with this, would you have been as supportive of him as you were of AngieSpeaks? Now again, I fully support AngieSpeaks. I fully and completely support this young woman. What happened to her was appalling, disgusting, reprehensible, and has no place occurring in anarchist or socialist society. Okay, this was utterly deplorable. Why the fuck does this thing not target my... Seriously, the targeting mechanics in this game are fucking ridiculous. Half the time, if you simply press the spacebar, it will target what you're shooting at. Half the time, it'll just shoot straight past it and you won't even... nothing. Just nothing. Fucking A. Learn to fucking code, you people. Not that I have any clue how to do that. I wish I knew how to code. That would be awesome. But in any event, and yes, I have tried to learn. I can manage to mod the files in Medieval 2 Total War. That's about it. That's the extent of my coding knowledge. But what happened to AngieSpeaks was a campaign of targeted harassment for wrongthing. Now, we've all seen these, usually directed against various enemies like Sargon of Akkad or V or Vernaculus or Mundane Matt, none of whom I actually consider enemies. Dissenters, certainly. Enemies, no. What was the phrase from Girl Genius? If I attacked everyone I didn't like, there wouldn't be very many people left. And that is, of course, the problem we have. If we attack everyone we happen to have the most minor and piddling of disagreements with, we're not going to have a liberal movement or a left-wing movement or any movement at all anymore, really. Which is the concern that was expressed when AngieSpeaks was attacked. That this was one of the few African American women in our movement, and that the attack on her reflected very poorly. Now, I don't know why it reflected more poorly that we attacked AngieSpeaks versus Sargon of Akkad, or why it reflects more poorly that we attacked AngieSpeaks than, for instance, Peter Coffin. This is one of the things I've taken great issue with over the years. We cannot grant certain persons immunities from otherwise reprehensible behavior, or the morality of behavior does not change depending on who the behavior is directed towards. That is something I have called monarchism, the idea that the king is more moral, therefore actions taken by the king, which would normally be reprehensible if a peasant were to do it, are suddenly acceptable because the king is doing it. This is what we are supposed to be fighting against, not charging headlong towards. But that aside, now, there were some rumors, and I want to be very clear, these are rumors, we have no evidence either way, that the people conducting this attack were not, in point of fact, anarchists. Everyone, I assume, remembers or can quickly look up Boston Antifa and the fact that it was an entirely false flag operation. There was no Antifa in Boston. or certainly the people calling themselves Boston Antifa were not associated with Antifa in any way. There were a group of conservatives who were trying to make Antifa look bad. And apparently, a significant portion of the people attacking AngieSpeaks came off of a website called Kiwi Farms, which is allegedly reactionary. Again, I don't get online enough to confirm these things myself. I work 70 hours a week. But I'd actually like to discuss for a second the baseline accusation, because again, this is second and third-hand knowledge. This is what I've been able to pick up from various Twitter discussions and YouTube threads. Two people had sex. I don't know whether they were intoxicated or not. There's no information on that. Affirmative consent may or may not have been used, but they have both simultaneously accused each other of sexual assault. Now, this has been discussed extensively in the men's movement, which is why I'm part of that movement. If you have two people of equal social standing, both intoxicated, again, I don't know if they were, both forget to use affirmative consent or consent of any kind, again, I don't know if that's the case here, and both claim to have been sexually assaulted, is there a victim? Again, both equal standing, both failed at consent, both were intoxicated. Can a sexual assault simultaneously occur with both participants perpetuating it? Again, I don't have the answer to this. I have no clue what the answer to this might be. But it is something that has been bandied about the men's movement extensively and almost, to my knowledge, totally ignored by the feminist movement. And it's a fairly important question, as we have just seen. Like, this was a scenario that was predicted and predictable, as was the situation of AngieSpeaks. I mean, once you accept that chasing people out of the movement because you don't like what they're saying is a reasonable thing to do, it is a matter of time before someone you may have wanted to be part of the movement is chased out. That's inevitably going to be the result of what happens. And there's really no way around that. It is the logical consequence of the decisions we have made as a movement to accept that blacklisting people for wrongthink is an appropriate thing to do in an anarchist society. Now, I can understand why this error has been made. Certainly, social norms are necessary in order for an anarchist society to function. And we need a way to enforce those norms. So, ostensibly, ostracizing people to some degree should be necessary. Even Peter Kropotkin consistently agrees with this point, where he says, quite clearly, I think in chapter 5, if you choose not to work, we will guarantee you shelter, food, and clothing, but no one will respect you. You will be treated as an invalid or a reflection of the previous bourgeoisie society. But he immediately makes a caveat. If you can find someone who is willing to put up with your behavior, or organize with a group of people who believe similarly to yourself, that is entirely appropriate. You are free to walk off the commune with your group of friends and find your own commune. That is not what we're seeing. What happened here was not that Miss Speaks was told she was not allowed on this or that Reddit. What happened was a group of people attempted to chase her off of all social media, which again is not acceptable. You do not have the right to destroy someone's means of subsistence merely because you happen to disagree with them on this or that particular point. And again, this is something I've been predicting for years. This is something that was entirely predictable for years. And it has consistently, and I'm going to be very blunt here, it has consistently been the trans movement that is at the epicenter of these problems again and again and again. I don't know why that is. I can theorize within the context of anarchist and socialist thinking. Gender is functionally a division of labor. If you had an individual who does not want to perform a socially useful function, it would benefit them to redefine such divisions in terms where they have no obligation to society while society is obligated towards them. Is this what is going on with the whole of the trans movement? Of course not. But a completely absurd and ridiculous idea. No, do not attempt to mischaracterize what I am saying as the whole of the trans movement is trying to weasel their way out of social obligations. Are there individuals in the trans movement who are possibly doing that? Yes, quite likely. It lends itself to it quite handily, I might add. As does feminism. As does a large number of social movements. But again, this is almost certainly a minority, in my view. I certainly do not hold the entirety of a movement accountable for the bad actions of a few individuals. Let's try and save our profile. This isn't a very good build. I really do need to rework this build. Yeah, so if you wondered what Star Sonata was like, this is what Star Sonata looks like. Ooh, augmented. I will take that. The ship is so slow. The game is slow. I've repeatedly begged them to increase the general play speed of the game. And I said, no, we don't need to. We like it this way. Okie dokie. You're going to have problems with player retention, but okay. I mean, honestly, this game is on many levels even slower than something like World of Tanks, and it has none of the strategic and tactical interest. I use the word interest that World of Tanks does. In World of Tanks, you have cover everywhere to hide behind. Here's this giant open field. Come on. Nope. chase him down, see what he is. But yeah, this was predicted and predictable. It was going to happen the instant we embraced the idea that dogpiling people on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube was an acceptable way to change public opinion. It was pretty much guaranteed. That Miss Speaks happens to have been the focal point of it. I am deeply sorry. She did not deserve this. But someone was going to get hit with this thing, sooner or later. We chose to dig this hole for ourselves. And until I hear Christiosity and Kevin Logan accept the fact that no matter how much they do not like Sargon of Akkad, he is entitled to a platform, this is going to repeat itself again sooner or later. Pick this up. Missing 6 space. Okay, what can we throw overboard here? There's some of those. That's the other problem this game has. The space expanders are like, do we even have one on this ship? I haven't bothered putting one on this ship. They're so pathetic. Yeah, empty hull extension slot. The space expanders only get you like 10 extra space, which is pathetic. That's another thing I should propose tonight. Make hull extensions that give you additional space at the cost of maneuverability, I suppose. Yeah, so that is that. So what would an appropriate system of social constraints be? First, it would have to be, proportional is the wrong term. If an individual, for instance, refused to perform productive labor, they would have to be denied something like video games or CDs, something that the productive labor they are refusing to perform would otherwise produce. There is really no circumstances I can think of under which refusing to accept an accusation could possibly be punishable by anything. Now, refusing to accept a proven fact, Like, one of the few things I support in our current system is the jury trial. The idea that a group of people should determine whether or not a thing has occurred. We do not blindly accept either the claims of an accuser or the claims of a defendant, but we seek impartially to learn, okay, what is the truth of this matter? I cannot conceive of a system of justice or a system of any system of adjudication that could function independent of those dynamics. We'll see what mining does to an asteroid. And that is what I think is really truly appalling. AngieSpeaks was not attacked because she specifically said this did not happen. She was attacked because she said, I don't know if it happened. Throughout the entire thing, she said, I do not have enough information to determine what happened here. Where is the relevant information? And the only reply she got, based on what she said, and I have every reason to believe her statements because they're perfectly visible. You can go to her Twitter feed and see them. The only reply she got was, this person has been accused, therefore you are to believe them. Which has been the mantra of feminism for decades. Certainly since my time at Antioch. We must believe the victims. Okay, minor detail. Do we know if this person's a victim or not? We have no way to determine whether anything has even happened without fact-finding. Oh, they say it's happened. Okay, that's nice. I can say I'm being beaten by Nazis, clubbed in the head at this exact second, but there's no thumping noise, and I'm able to speak in coherent sentences. So I'm pretty sure I am not being beaten by Nazis at this exact second. And yes, there is every reason for someone to lie about whether or not they have committed an assault, or rather whether or not the person they're accusing has committed an assault. I myself have had 3 or 4 different people grab someone else's behind at a bar, and when the person turned around furious as hell that their behind had been grabbed, point the finger straight at me. False accusations are a thing, though not for any of the reasons feminists seem to think they are, which is quite confusing to me, you know? But in any event, we need to have a very large discussion as a community. How to handle situations where someone is committing a social faux pas, and how to deal with that without threatening their means of subsistence. Because that is one of the important parts of anarchism. Kropotkin himself, again I paraphrase, it is impossible to control a proletariat whose bellies are full. And this is how we ended up in the situation we are in. Brigaded by people who are not interested in actual equality, but only in changing the dynamic of who benefits, and threatening the subsistence of the very proletariat they are supposed to be helping, because they know full well, as does anyone else, that that's the only way to control them. only way to force them to do what the new elite want them to do. And do not mistake me, AngieSpeaks is not going to be the last. She's not the first either, but she's the first that people actually were, oh, this is bad, we have a problem. And again, simply broadly condemning social ostracization in this particular instance is not enough. This has happened to dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of people, many of whom did nothing to deserve it. They merely questioned the orthodoxy of those in control, who have been left in control of our communities. And for this, we're driven out of the community. I shudder to think how many dozens, hundreds, thousands we have lost to the Bush-era idea, if you are not with us, you are against us. So, as I said, I'm going to start the discussion tonight. I'm probably woefully under-equipped to do so, but it needs to happen. First, subsistence must absolutely be off the table. Under absolutely no circumstances can the subsistence of any person be threatened, particularly in the case where what they are committing is a mere social faux pas and not a material violation. What do I mean by a material violation? If an individual refuses to contribute to the social product, and I mean full-on says, I'm not helping you with anything, I'm just going to sit here and mooch off everyone else's work and not help in any way. And I am out of space. What can I just? Nothing! Okay, I should have brought a fucking thing with me. Okay, so you get to watch me hike all the heck way back to Earth Force. Oh, up here. It's going to be a long hike. Let's have a conversation while I'm doing this. If someone refuses to materially contribute, this is a problem because by definition someone else is going to have to make up their production. Yet even in this case, Kropotkin does not believe it is appropriate to deny them subsistence if we have the resources available to give it to them. You may deny them the niceties. They don't get to have things like CDs or video games, or music or whatever, MP3s, whatever. But you may not deny them their ability to eat food, wear clothes, and sleep in heated shelters. Social ostracization is acceptable in that circumstance. Now, let us jump to the next level. If you deny an agreed upon fact, now we're not discussing something disputed. If a murder has happened, multiple witnesses come forward and say, yes, absolutely, that person did it. We go through the entire process of adjudication, whatever that is, and it is 110% determined, yeah, they did it. If you assist that person in escaping, what do we do? First off, what do we do with the murderer? I mean, multiple people said you cannot have prisons in anarchist society. I do not for 1 second imagine people are going to stop killing each other simply because we have guaranteed everyone shelter, food, and clothing. I don't see that as being a thing. So we need to have a large discussion about how physically destructive behavior is handled in an anarchist society. We need to have a discussion about how social status is handled in an anarchist society. My view is abolish it. My view is the advent of a society where shelter, food, and clothing is guaranteed to all, where individuals cannot achieve based on the hard work of others, will demolish the social institutions that allow status to exist. Because from what I personally have observed, most status-seeking behavior is merely the desire to gain at the expense of others. That's what it is. People are seeking status because they want to increase their opportunities to exploit the labor of others, either by achieving management positions, by achieving a reputation where they can get into positions of authority. Emma Goldman referred to the first wave of feminists as parasites of parasites. And I earnestly believe it is for exactly this reason, that they were trying to achieve status and station not because they wanted to help the laboring class, but because they wanted an increased share of what the laboring class produced. Now, I'm certain there are people who will disagree with this, but I am curious what they believe the function of social standing in society is, if not to increase one's share of the social product beyond what the individual has themselves produced. Lastly, we need to discuss the situation Angie and so many others have found themselves in. That is, having committed a purely social faux pas. No one is materially harmed by anything Angie did. The accuser is not harmed, either of them. The accused is not harmed, either of them. She merely stated, I don't know the answer here. And that is socially unacceptable in our current framework, to the point where she is being driven out of the movement. Is this something we can have? Is this something that, as an anarchist society, as a society without hierarchies, it is acceptable to drive someone out for saying, I don't have the answer here, and I'm not going to make a determination until I have more information? I don't see how it is. I mean, let me rephrase. Those who are stating that she is required to make a determination in their favor without having enough information to do so are, on a functional level, declaring themselves to be in a hierarchy over her. That is, they are declaring that their perception of events is so superior that they may make the determination for her what has or has not happened. How is that not a hierarchy? How is that not a declaration of a hierarchy? I don't see how it can be constructed as anything else. Even if you have two people not even accusing each other, just one person is saying, I think this is what happened, another person is saying, I think this is what happened. For one person to declare the other person categorically wrong without evidence in one direction or another is a hierarchy. You are declaring that one person's perceptions are more important than the other person's perceptions. That's what you're saying. Now, you may earnestly believe one person's perceptions are more important than another person's perceptions. But to force that person whose perceptions you deem to be inferior to accept the perceptions of the person you deem to be superior is again a hierarchy. Look at that. Absolutely and utterly 35 space. I mean, seriously, 35 space. 15 space. 20 space. That might actually be worth it. No, Freighter Island. God fucking damn it. 13 space. This is pitiable. Utterly pitiable. Ugh. Yeah, I'm going to have to talk to the dev team. That's one of the things I absolutely love about this game. The dev team is on the Discord. I actually wish I could run the Discord while I'm running the game, but I can't. It'll freeze the fucking recording. But no, you can go right on the Discord and talk to the dev team and argue with the dev team. I've actually gotten into huge arguments with the dev team about various changes, and quite a few people have. There have been page-long arguments with people going, listen, this change you made is horrible. Can you please revert it? And the dev team just sits there and explains why they made that change. And we've frequently gotten them reverted. Simply because so many people are saying, listen, this isn't working how you think it is. This is a horrible change. You need to change this back. But in any event, I really don't feel like making you watch me wander the hell way back. This is what a system looks like in Star Sonata. Hang on. Dunk. Dunk. All of these ships are hauling cargo from all of these stations to all of these other stations just to fuel production. I have no clue what. It might be missiles. It might be something else. This really is a fun game, if you don't mind the pacing. But apparently everyone minds the pacing. Is there a station here somewhere? That is a complete... Is that an empty? No, it's not. Okay. So do we have a completely empty belt here? Really? Totally empty belt. Month into the uni. Holy shit. That would be like, whoa. How the fuck does that happen? But in any event, as a community, we need to discuss the following things. 1, can social status exist within an anarchist society? 2, where and at what level are the limits of punishment within an anarchist society? 3, if social status has any right to exist within anarchism, can those with status dictate what the punishments are to be? This is something we have to think over, and we need to do it right quick.